Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
All right, one of my favorite parts of knowing this guy right here is his ability to hear a question, maybe out in the world or in a book, and basically bring it to us as a couple, bring it to our family, bring it to you guys, and let it transform reality. And he is doing it once again because this question has kind of been our theme for the last month or so?
Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
We brought this question to Mackinac Island with us. He did not create the question, but here it is. What would it look like? What would this look like if it were easy? And we ended up applying that question to lots of our conversations on the drive while we were sitting and relaxing, just kind of tackling some of those challenges and being able to say this part of life is really a challenge right now. What would it look like if it were easy? And it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful reframe. I heard it first from Tim Ferriss, who shared it when he was going through what he considered to be a midlife crisis. He was kind of in the middle of a lot of complicated things, and frankly, we used it in the show here as we're thinking about changing things up. So this monologue segment is a dialogue, I suppose, with the two of us now. Some of the more recent shows we've done, I've done some videos, and they have been really cool and really fun to work on, but have been kind of complicated and take a while. And it was a tinker project for me to see how I liked it. Well, it started to get to be where it was kind of overwhelming to do it too much. So we talked about the show in general of all right, what would it look like if it were easier? Because I think a lot of times we share a little bit of an all or nothing vibe where if things get a little bit too hard or we don't like it, we want to throw the whole thing out. And I think one lesson that I pulled from Mackinac Island is don't ditch something only because it's gotten too complicated if you haven't tried to make it simpler first.
Can you guys relate to this? And
Right.
Pop up in the comments. That's one of the exciting parts of this kind of more dialogue based monologue, to be able to interact with you guys a little bit on this concept, because I think there are times where you're just kind of up against a wall on something. You're like, I just can't figure this out, so let's just not do it anymore. And that actually is a disservice to whatever the situation might be, as you've said, because there is an opportunity for tinkering to make it easier first.
Yeah. Jennifer points out that challenges make life interesting and create lifelong lessons. Yes, that is, I totally agree with that. Just to be clear, this is not about trying to live a life of leisure or eliminating all challenge from your life. It's basically a tool for when you're stuck. And it's a way to kind of unleash your creativity in a new way, to open up the floodgates to allow creativity to flow maybe even more abundantly than it has been.
Yeah.
Okay?
So this kind of happened in a conversation we had when we went to Florida in early February, where we took a break after the whole January we had with my dad's passing and everything. We drove down to Florida and we had to figure out what we were going to do with the Escape Adulthood Summit, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I mean, we've really processed this over the last few months, but we were kind of in one of those challenging mindsets where it's okay, this has really gotten complicated. It's basically a 2-day wedding that we do almost every year. I mean, we've taken 2 years off in the course of
11 years.
11 years. This is basically a 2-day wedding with multiple catered meals, and there's
venue, travel,
and
logistics, entertainment.
Right.
And
it's become so complicated that it has been more of a challenge than maybe we are willing to continue. So it's one of those do we just get rid of it, right? And that none of us really wanted that. And so how many hours did we work through that?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we kind of got to, and I'm not exactly even sure, just hours and hours of conversation, was this Wonder Weekend premise where we can kind of divide it into 2 different events and have one be for Wonder and Whimsy, which was also part of our challenge with the summit, where serving an audience where someone has never met us before ever and spending 2 days with us versus a Wonder Whimsy Society member who's deep in the thick of adultitis fighting, and serving that audience at the exact same time is very challenging content-wise. So this was pretty exciting to say, well, let's break it into two. Let's bring Wonder Night back, reinvent that, and then have a Wonder Whimsy Society family reunion the next day, which allows for people who want to fly to come in and have this multiple day event opportunity. But I don't know, it took us a while, didn't it, to get to that?
Right. Yeah, it is. Basically, we asked ourselves, what did we like best about the summit, and what was what were the difficult parts? And was there anything we could make easier, right? So being able to host it in our backyard basically meant like we didn't have the cost and logistics of finding a venue. Like that's one of the most expensive parts of it.
Yes.
Again, being in our backyard, we didn't have to fly our team there, the costs and logistics of the travel and the lodging and all that. We don't have to do as many meals. The agenda is much simpler. I think still maybe even more awesome, but it's just less planning is required for it.
Yeah.
And because we're only marketing that to people who are already in the Wonder Whimsy Society, it's been a lot less time and money on the marketing and the promotion side of things, because we have a smaller group than the entire world that we're talking about.
We even got to pick the weekend, like hand pick the weekend, because we only had a small part of a rental, which is Friday night for Wonder Night, that we had to accommodate, which was a lot easier than trying to get like a 2-day venue and trying to figure that all out, which is very tricky when you have wedding venues as your venue because people book so far out. So anyway, all of that to say, it was such a lesson for us of like, wow, we could have ditched it all. But that question, what would this look like if it were easy, allowed us to keep the conversation going, let all of it evolve. And of course, it's continuing to be a tinker project. We're going to assess it, see how we like it, and move on from there.
Yeah. So in your life, that could look a lot of different ways. It might be looking at a process of something that you have to do and looking at, is there one part that's a bottleneck, that's a struggle? Maybe there's something that you have been doing for a very long time that was there for a very good reason that now is no longer as relevant, right? That could be an example of making it easier, right? It could be that you share your problem with someone on the outside. Maybe it's a coach, a friend, a trusted advisor, a counselor, something like that. And they sometimes have a different view where it's like, well, why are you doing this? Or why don't you just do this instead? And sometimes just having that outside perspective can change everything. And frankly, one of the most valuable things that we can do is to just let stuff go, to say no. I think our lives get more complicated when we say yes way too often.
Yes.
And we need to clear things away to get things to the next level.
So here we are, July. Fall is right around the corner. I hate to tell you, but I know a big complaint for a lot of people is come October, come November, people are so burnt out with how busy the fall was. And oftentimes I hear my peers, especially with families, saying, we don't even have a weeknight. We don't even have a weeknight that we can sit and have dinner together. And then that puts a lot of extra pressure on the weekends, which often don't play in your favor, which then puts an enormous amount of continual stress on your life. So the idea is ask yourself, maybe, how can this be more easy? How can I simplify? And maybe you set up some rules, which we've shared in the past, life rules, right? Where it's like, I only say yes if 2 of my 7 nights are still free. Or maybe there's whatever that number is for you as an extrovert, as an introvert, as someone who has people that you care for living with you. So that idea of just maybe set yourself up for more success by simplifying it ahead of time.
Yeah, and it just comes back to this question. It's another one in your toolbox. What would this look like if it were easy? Again, we overcomplicate things all the time. Sometimes by over planning, Sometimes we overplan because we want something to be good, just like the summit, right?
Yeah.
We want it to be magical, and so we put maybe a little bit more into it than needs to be.
Yeah.
But sometimes we say yes too often without taking things away. Sometimes we make assumptions, or kind of like what Jennifer's referring to here, where we sometimes need to break things down into smaller chunks as well. So yeah, like it goes with the question, what does this make possible when something bad comes in your life? What would this look like if it were easy? There's a question for you to ponder. Hopefully it will open up some new creative pathways for you. Maybe it'll help you find some gold in something that is no longer serving you all the way that it used to be. And I hope it's a valuable thing. So